Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 20th of August of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. First, we're going to discuss few global events, probably the most important ones that will determine the future of Ukraine, the future of this war, special military operation for the next year, I believe. So, for example, today the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, went and visited Netherlands, and as a result of negotiation, as a result of talks with the local authorities, Zelensky was promised that he will get 42 F-16s. Of course, this is a very dangerous situation because we understand that the Ukrainians are not going to receive these F-16s, for example, tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. We understand that the first machines will arrive somewhere in the 2024. Almost the same time when the Ukrainians will start using the Abrams tanks, so F-16s, Abrams tanks, and of course the cluster rounds for HIMARS systems. So basically, currently we understand the picture, the upcoming picture of the conflict in 2024, what kind of type of weapon the Ukrainians are going to use. Basically, this is going to be a war not with NATO. When talking about equipment, this is going to be a classical war between Russia and the United States of America, because the Ukrainians will use just a weapon of United States production or something like this. After the visit of the Netherlands, the Ukrainian President Zelensky visited Denmark, and there he has also another discussions, talks with local authorities, and the Denmark authorities promised him to give more F-16s, and later we got another update that Denmark will provide the Ukrainians 19 F-16. So if we calculate the total number of F-16s that the Ukrainians will get, they're going to be 61 F-16. So somebody, I believe, believes in numbers and wants to create a mystical number, communication or connection with two numbers, 61 and 16. Maybe somebody thinks that this situation will help. After that, Zelensky returned back to Ukraine. But there was another important update, another important piece of news regarding the upcoming situation, is that in September, from 17 till 24th of September, there's going to be another Rammstein meeting in Germany, where the countries, the donors, the vendors of Ukraine will try to probably analyze the summer military campaign. They will try to understand what they can do next, and they will probably make the first mock-up of the military military situation in the 2024. And as I understand, during that meeting, the Western countries will make some first agreements regarding the weapon, regarding the tanks, aircrafts, and many other different types of weapon that they will send Ukraine in the end of 2023 and 2024 years. So this is the situation. The situation is critical because F-16 is not just the aircrafts that, according to the Ukrainians, they're planning to use to shut down the Russian helicopters Ka-52 on the combat line or Russian aircrafts. F-16 is a type of weapon, is type of aircraft that is able to carry nuclear weapon. And this is probably the most worried thing for the Russians, because basically under the cover of the military aid, the United States of America will deploy their nuclear carriers on the territory of Ukraine, and the distance, for example, from Kyiv to Moscow will be reduced from the NATO countries, the NATO control countries, to Moscow will be reduced almost in few hundred kilometers. The situation is not good. Furthermore, the Ukrainian sources, which is very interesting, published the video of drone attack that took place yesterday in the vicinity of Novgorod area. On this video, on these photos, we see the results of another drone attack, and as a result of that attack, the Russians lost at least 222 M3 that they were using to bomb and attack Ukrainians with calibers and different types of missiles, X50, X101, or something like this. And as you can see, according to information we have, everything, there are so many fun situations from this drone attack. The first one is that, as you can see, the most powerful, the Russian strategical aviation was destroyed using just a regular FVP drone. There were no such attack from the territory of Ukraine, let's say, with the FVP drone or different types of drone who passed these thousands of kilometers and attack the territory of Novgorod region. No, there was Ukrainian spies in this area which came as close as possible to the airfield and basically attacked the airfield with the drone. So basically, another funny thing is that the Russians still don't have the hangars and some blocks above the aircrafts that can secure them. This is the second funny thing. And the third funny thing from this situation, according to the Russian sources, of course, is that this picture was made by the Ukrainian side, not by the Russian side. This picture was made by the Ukrainians. So imagine yourself how close the Ukrainians were able to get to the aircraft and to make a photo and then to send this photo to the Ukrainians, and then the Ukrainians were able to publish this. So a lot of questions, and there are almost no answers to this critical situation. Now we're moving further and start discussing the situation on the ground. And first we're going to start not from Bradley Square, Zaporozhye or Donetsk. First we're going to talk about Kupiansk area and Harkov area. As you can see, the military summary has already added all the icons of evacuation cities, the cities that Ukrainians are planning to evacuate today. The Russian sources, very reliable Russian sources like RIA Novosti, its government organization, published the secret document of upcoming evacuation from Harkov area. There are around 68 settlements that, according to that document, should be evacuated immediately. But as you can see, according to this structure and configuration of evacuation, this evacuation is completely differs. This evacuation differs from the evacuation that was announced in the Kupiansk front line a few weeks ago. For example, if we increase the number of updates, you will understand the difference. So this is the configuration of the first evacuation that was announced in the first part of August. So these icons with the stars is the settlements that should be evacuated. And according to this map, we see that Ukrainians took a decision to evacuate not just the first defense line, not the first settlement lines. I'm talking about the positions of Russian forces or Russian Federation. So as you can see, according to the previous evacuation, the Ukrainians took a decision to evacuate a few lines of settlements deep inside the Kharkiv region. But when talking about current evacuation, and the Ukrainians took a decision to evacuate just the first lines of the settlements, just the first lines that located in front of the border and possible combat line, possible future combat line. What does it mean? For example, when talking about Kupiansk evacuation, we see the withdrawal evacuation. So evacuation when the Ukrainians realize and understand that they need to leave a lot of settlements while they are able to stop the Russian progress or Russian movements. And this is the reason why there are like few lines of settlements were evacuated. When talking about Kharkiv area, we see not like retreating evacuation, we see defense evacuation. What does it mean and what is the difference? The thing is that the Ukrainians took a decision, probably they understand, they see the Russian accumulation of the forces. There are few options. I'm not saying that Ukrainians are planning just to to defend. Maybe the Ukrainians are planning to attack, and this is the reason why they took a decision to evacuate just the first line of settlements, and probably they will collect their forces in the buildings, in houses and so on, in empty buildings and empty houses. And this is the first option for attack purposes. Maybe the Ukrainians are planning to attack, because if you know, today Zelensky was asked the question about whether he is able to, whether he considers such a option to change some territory for the entering the NATO, and he replied yes, that he ready to change some territory, and he is ready to change Belgorod for entrance in NATO. So you understand his way of thinking, and probably maybe this evacuation line is some evidence of Ukrainian plans to attack in direction of Belgorod with the forces and power they have. From the other side, this is maybe another situation that the Russians are accumulating their forces, and we remember the speech of Putin when he told that if Ukrainians would continue bombing and shelling Belgorod, the Russians would be forced to create the barrier and some buffer zone in this area. Everything might happen, but anyway, we see and we understand that the clashes and activities in Kupiansk front line and Kharkiv area are going to be intensified, and both sides, either the Russians and the Ukrainians, are getting ready for more bloody clashes in this area. When talking about Kupiansk itself, today the Russians, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, reported that as a result of fierce clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 60 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles and 2 artillery systems. The Russians managed to repel the Ukrainians' attacks in the vicinity of Sinkovka, Alshany, Novoselovskaya, Ivanovska, this is Ivanovka, and so on. Furthermore, right before I start making this video, we got another update that the Russians, as a result of usage FAB 500, destroyed the road, the supply road in Kupiansk that the Ukrainians were using to supply and support their forces in this area. And according to some sources, when talking just about this area, about Kupiansk front line, that was the only road that Ukrainians had to supply and support their forces in Kucherevka, Podoly, Petropavlovka, Sinkovka. So this is the area where the road, the bridge, it was a pontoon bridge or something like this, that was destroyed. The next and the only left one is located in the vicinity of Barova. This is the settlement by the name of Barova. Where is our... It's in front of this one. This is Barova, and this is the second area, the next area where the Ukrainians have some supply and support roads. So imagine yourself the issues and problems that Ukrainians currently have with logistics. So there is just one road left. I will add the icons, the line softly, somewhere in the vicinity of Barova. And imagine yourself what kind of logistic job the Ukrainians need to do to start to send their forces in the direction of Kupiansk, and furthermore to evacuate wounded and broken equipment from the same front line. Anyway, we see that the Ukrainians have significant problems in this area. The Russians are pushing, they're pushing. Furthermore, as we discussed in the previous video, the Ukrainians have already evacuated hospital, doctors, and every equipment they need for wounded soldiers and for supporting the wounded soldiers in this area. But this is normal situation because the Russians are getting closer to the combat line, to the settlement, and it's from security perspective, it's better to evacuate the personnel, the hospital personnel, as far as possible from this area, because this will allow at least not to risk with the wounded soldiers in hospitals and so on, because it's very dangerous to keep your hospitals, the accumulation of wounded soldiers right in front of the combat line, because the distance, let's say, from the Russian positions to Kupiansk is already 9 kilometers. Every single type of artillery can attack the Ukrainian forces accumulation in Kupiansk. So this is the situation about this area. We expect a real intensifying clashes, and furthermore we expect some movements on the Harkov front line as well. I'm not sure, and it's very difficult to say whether the Russians are planning to storm Harkov and to attack in this area, but anyway, something big and something important is going to take place in this area within the next months. Now we are moving further to Liman front line, and as you can see, there are almost nothing from this area. We haven't received almost nothing. There was no video geolocated updates, just the Ministry of Defense reported that as a result of fierce fightings, the Russians managed to repel at least 3 attacks, one of them in the vicinity of Tarskoye. The Ukrainians were trying to cut the Tarskoye salient from many sides. The attack was repelled by the Russian forces. The Ukrainians were forced to step back. Probably it was some operation with reconnaissance team, and as a result of those clashes, the Ukrainians lost 70 soldiers. Another attack the Ukrainians tried to implement in the vicinity of Bilogorovka, trying to increase the area of control by attacking direction of industrial area and on the south of the landfill, but those attacks were repelled and the Ukrainians also were forced to step back. And now we are moving probably to the one of the most important areas of today regarding the updates, and we're going to talk about Artyomovsk Bakhmut, and we are going to talk one more time about the Andreevka meat grinder. Yesterday we discussed, if you remember, that Ukrainians attack in direction of Andreevka, and that attack was repelled by the special unit Akhmat. And today we got more details regarding the geolocations, and according to geolocations, that battle that we discussed yesterday took place on the south of Andreevka, and currently this video is geolocated for 99%, I believe so, and maybe 100%. And according to this video, as you can see, the Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours were trying to attack Andreevka, and as a result of that attack, as you can see, according to geolocation, the Ukrainians managed to get as close as possible to the main Russian defense belt that goes along the railways in this area. So they were almost managed to capture, but the Russians, probably that was maybe a trap, an ambush. The Russians allowed the Ukrainians to get as close as possible. After that, they made the huge and massive artillery strikes, and as a result of those strikes, the Ukrainians lost up to 12 armored vehicles, 2 tanks, significant number of infantry, and and so on. And today we got more details of that battle, or probably more details of more attempt from the Ukrainian side to attack. Today we got another geolocation, how the Ukrainians were managed to get the railways, the main defense belt in this area, but from the north of Andriivka. On this video we see how the Ukrainian convoy of 4 armored vehicles was heading to the railways. The Russians of course saw everything, track everything, and after small pause they start bombing, and as soon as the armored vehicles got as close as possible to the main defense belt, the Russians start attacking this area with all types of weapons they have, with tanks from hidden positions, with artillery, with drones and so on. And as a result of that episode of clashes, the Ukrainians lost more 4 armored vehicles and the unknown number of infantry in that area. Also today, so that means that during probably previous 24 hours the Ukrainians made another attempt to attack in this direction. First the Ukrainians got the forest line in this area, and then they start movement to the south along the forest line, and they got in ambush on the north of Andriivka and was destroyed completely, and just completely destroyed in the north of that settlement. Today we got another video from the southern part of Andriivka, another video of Ukraine attempt to attack the settlement from the south with armored fist. One more time the Russians managed to discover everything, to track the Ukrainian movement, and after they allowed the Ukrainians to get as close as possible to the Russians' defense belt. But maybe it's wrong to say to get as close as possible to the Russian. Probably the Russians allowed the Ukrainians to stretch their attack fist and to get as far as possible from their defense belt, to increase the timings and the time they need to, let's say, to return back. And after that the Russians started bombing and shelling the Ukrainian positions in these area forces, and as a result of that attack a known number of armored vehicles and infantry were destroyed. So basically that was like a massacre, another suicide operation from the Ukrainian side in direction of Andriivka. The Russians managed to repel every single attack and to force the Ukrainians to step back. The first wave was going from the north part of Andriivka, so basically they have almost encircled the settlement, you see, that attack from the north, from the south, and they got like 99% of operation and have almost captured and encircled the settlement, but they were defeated. The second attack was from the south. Probably those 2 attacks took place at the same time, and within having significant losses, the Ukrainians were forced to step back, and they were forced to leave this area and to move back on the Ukrainian side of the canal. Furthermore, the Russians, at least some Russian forces, maybe that was an order or maybe some like Russian spirit forced them to counterattack. Some Russian forces started counterattacking the Ukrainians, and they sent their armored vehicles to the canal area, probably making some clearing operation or something like this, or to force the Ukrainians to step back, or to find infantry in the brushes or something like that, or to make a vision of counterattacking, who knows. But that was a very big mistake, because this area was under complete control of Ukrainian drone forces. Obviously the Ukrainians probably calculated the risks. They understand that there is a very high chances that their attack can be repelled, and then the Russians could try to counterattack, and that's why they control this area with drones. And on this video we see how the Russian tank armored vehicle was trying to attack, and then the armored vehicle got on the minefield, or maybe was destroyed with some other type of weapon. Anyway, this situation was completely covered and tracked by the Ukrainian drone forces. So that was a massacre in the vicinity of Andriivka. The same situation are taking place on the northern flank. The Ukrainians 3rd or 4th day in a row tried to attack the Russian positions in the forest on the southwest of Zaliznyansk, but Russians still yet managed to repel every single Ukrainian attack along this line. Furthermore, the Russians are bombing and shelling the Ukrainian positions in that forest, trying to slow them down and to pin them down, not allow them to accumulate the critical mass and to start attack. Another day on this front line finished in Russian favor. The Ukrainians were defeated and were forced to step back. The Ukrainians, of course, tried to establish some fire control, some drone control over all types of reserves that goes to this area. On this video, we see how the Ukrainians managed to discover the Russian armored vehicle that were heading to the combat line, probably to support the Russian forces in that battle on the vicinity of Zaliznyansk. But the Ukrainians discovered, and as a result of strike, destroyed that armored vehicle as well. Furthermore, the Ukrainians tried to control the Russian forces forces somewhere in the vicinity of Bakhmut, just a regular situation where the Ukrainians were bombing and attacking the Russian positions. From the Russian side, we see also a very powerful and active and successful counter-artillery duels. During the previous days, during 24 hours, the Russians managed to discover and to destroy a lot of static Ukrainian positions. These areas full of drones, intelligence reconnaissance teams that controls and try to provide as much as possible information. In this video we see how the Russians managed to discover two Ukrainian armored vehicles, and as a result of drone strikes those armored vehicles were destroyed. Lancet also during the previous day destroyed a lot of Ukrainian equipments. For example, in this video we see how the Russians managed to discover another Ukrainian air defense system, Strela-10, and as a result of Lancet strike, that air defense system was destroyed. And almost the same situation in the south, but in this area the Russians discovered the Ukrainian artillery system Krab that was supporting the Ukrainian offensive operation in the vicinity of Andriivka. During that offensive operation, the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian positions, and as a result of strike, that artillery was destroyed as a result of artillery strike, not with Lancet or something like this. The Russians reported that as a result of fierce clashes on Donetsk front line, the Ukrainians lost 280 soldiers, 10 armored vehicles and 3 artillery systems, M777 howitzer and 2 howitzer D20 and D30. Now we are moving to Donetsk, to South Donetsk area, and today we had significant number of very interesting updates from my favorite front lines like Krasnogorovka and Novomikhailovka. When talking about Krasnogorovka, the Russians continue discovering process of Ukrainian positions. According to this video, the author of this video claims that the Russians managed to discover the headquarters of 79th Air Assault Brigade that is located in this region, and as a result of artillery strike, the Russians managed to destroy either headquarters, some positions, and ammo depot. Furthermore, the Russians continue pressure in the vicinity of Novomikhailovka. Today we got a lot of updates from this area. The Russians continue storming and clearing their paths in direction of the settlement from the south, as we discussed in the previous videos, and from the north. Today the Russians also added another type of bombings of this area, not just artillery or helicopters with Ulmur, not just tanks from the hidden positions, not just drones. Today the Russians started bombing the settlement with the guided bombs, and on this video we see how the Russians attacked very accurately the Ukrainian positions along the forest lines that goes from Novomikhailovka to the Russian positions in direction of Marinka. Very accurate bombings, they got right in target, and as a result of those strikes probably some local ammo depots or Ukrainian positions were destroyed. So the Russians have almost completed their clearing mission before the troopers will start movements to the south. Furthermore, the Russians destroyed a lot of ammo depots in the vicinity of settlement Konstantinovka, and then, like almost the entire day the Russians was working from these positions. They established drones and they were trying to bomb settlements. There are a lot of buildings, as you can see. Some of them are empty, some of them the Ukrainians are using for the warehouses. On this video we see that the Russians destroyed one warehouse. The Ukrainians started evacuation of some assets from this building to another building. The Russians discovered the movements of the Ukrainian forces, and then they redeployed their ammo depot in another place, and after that the Russians destroyed another ammo depot. So everything is almost ready to start the greatest Russian offensive operation in this area. And if somehow the Russians are able to penetrate this bridgehead and to capture at least once of this settlement, the entire front line could be collapsed automatically. So let's follow the situation. Also today the Russians published a very interesting video, just video because the picture is very, not, we can't say beautiful, but very hilarious. I don't know. The Russians were bombing Ugledar massively, the positions of the Ukrainian forces, and as you can see, like a lot of smoke, a lot of explosions, but the numbers and results we don't have. The Russians reported that as a result of fierce clashes in the South Donetsk area, the Ukrainians lost 130 soldiers, 7 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems. When talking about the Yemivka tactical bridgehead, for now, at least for today, we haven't received almost nothing from the Ukrainian side regarding the drone controls, artillery strikes on the line between Kremenchik, Staromlynovka, Lyubimovka, Priutinya. We got just a lot of updates from the Russian side. There was just one update from the Ukrainians, and we will discuss it. First of all, the Ukrainians, after they managed to try to implement offensive operation among the fields with the armored fist in this direction, the Ukrainians will remember that battle that took place a few days ago. The Ukrainians were completely defeated and destroyed. After that, the Ukrainians started attacking and clearing the fields in this area with the drones, artillery strikes. And for example, in this video we see how the Ukrainians managed to discover the Russian tank in this area along the forest, and after that the Ukrainians started bombing and shelling this area, and as a result of that attack, probably the Russians lost at least two tanks in this area, 2 tanks from this attack position that the Russians were using to attack the Ukrainian forces in Urozhaine. So that was possibly the only geolocated video from the Ukrainian side. After the Ukrainians destroyed the tanks, also they took a decision to complete this territory with the cluster rounds. Probably they're trying to get the infantry or tank drivers who were hiding among the forest lines. The Russians from their side understand the entire situation. Currently they're completely focused just on one target, not to allow the Ukrainians to accumulate their forces on the south of Staromayorsk and the south of Urozhaine. On this video we see how the Russians almost 24 hours, 7 days a week bomb and attack these 2 settlements with the guided bombs with one purpose: not to allow the Ukrainians to accumulate their critical mass on the south of these 2 settlements, because as soon as the Ukrainians are able to accumulate this critical mass, they will continue their offensive operation further to the south in direction of the settlement by the name of Zavitne Bajanye. Also, something like in parallel mode with the attack in direction of the fields between all these settlements. Also, the Russians continue bombing and establish some fire control with Lancet in the vicinity of Velika Novoselovka. And probably we got today at least too many videos from the Russian side. Maybe the Russians realized, calculated and understood the critical situation in Vremevka, because the previous 2 weeks shown us that the Russians also can be defeated and they were forced to step back. And basically we start receiving a lot of updates from the Russian side with drones, with guided bombs and so on. For example, in this video we see how the Russians discard and destroy probably the tanks of the 1st tank brigade that recently was redeployed in this area, and a little bit further to the north we see that the Russians destroyed another armored vehicle of Ukrainian forces somewhere in the north of Velika Novoselovka, probably also another tank. So as you can see, a small operational pause for now. The Ukrainians try to accumulate the critical mass. And one more time, very important, all these events, all the Ukrainians' attempts to attack, to connect with the piece of news regarding 61 F-16. This is very important because this update, this piece of news, the main purpose of this piece of news is to inspire the Ukrainian soldiers to continue clashes, to give them some hope and to give them some feeling that even if not today, then in a few months when F-16s will arrive, they will win the war. It's of course their logic, it's their attempt to inspire the Ukrainian soldiers. Now the Ukrainians try to make the same situation as they implemented with HIMARS, with Bayraktars, with HIMARS, like something very cool weapon that will become a game changer or something like this. But obviously we understand that F-16s are not game changers. It's not the regular aircrafts, of course, and sometimes they're much more powerful in comparison with the Russians ones, but anyway, this is not a game changer. Basically, this is the process of replacement of Ukrainian Su-25, Su-24, MiG-31, MiG-29 that the Ukrainians had as a legacy of a Soviet period of time, but currently almost everything was destroyed. And the Ukrainians do need some aircrafts in the sky. They need to have at least some control over the sky. And this is basic replacement, nothing more. And now we're moving further to the Zaporozhye area, and today we got a lot of very interesting video geolocations. The Ukrainians continue their offensive operation in the northern part of that settlement, and today we got at least 3 video confirmations that Ukrainians have already entered the northern part of Robotyne using the Bradleys. For example, in this video we see the entire process of the storming, how the Ukrainians try to very carefully, step by step, but to enter inside of the settlement with the Bradleys. Probably they managed to enter the settlement. So this is geolocated video showing the process of entering the Robotyne from the northeastern part of the settlement. For example, in this video we see at least 2 Bradleys who are already in the side of the settlement, running among the streets and so on. On this video we see another Bradley. So maybe these are the same Bradleys but in different types of the settlement, because they always need to change their positions or they will be destroyed by the Russian Lancet drone strikes. Anyway, the Ukrainians have already started accumulation of their critical mass in the northern part of Robotyne for further offensive operation to the south, with the purpose to force the Russians to step back in the direction of Novopokrovka. The most important fierce battles are about to begin in this area. The Russians try to control the positions on the east of Robotyne because the Ukrainians also started their movements and trying to develop their bridgehead in the vicinity in direction of Verbova. There was another fierce battle in this area. As a result of those clashes, the Ukrainians lost significant number of armored vehicles. Up to 14 armored vehicles were calculated. I'm not saying that all of them belong to the Ukrainians. Maybe there are some of them belong to the Russian side, because there was a video almost from the same area how the Ukrainians managed to discover and to destroy the Russian tank in the same area. So probably the photo was not just about the Ukrainian tanks but also about the Russians that used to be in this area. Furthermore, the Ukrainians continue bombing massively Verbova, trying to suppress and to pin down the Russian forces in that settlement. On this video we see the edge Russian position in this forest line right on the edge of the settlement. The Ukrainians always try to attack this area with bombs, with artillery strikes, trying to destroy as much as possible, trying to pin down and not to allow the Russians to send some reinforcements and reserves to the edge positions in the fields using this road. So currently the Ukrainians want to cut this supply road, this rotation road, to increase their own chances and possibilities for successful attack. The Russians reported that as a result of fierce clashes in Zaporozhye area, the Ukrainians lost 135 soldiers, 9 armored vehicles, including 2 tanks and 2 strikers, and 4 artillery systems and 1 radar ANTPQ-50. When talking about Kherson area, we haven't received nothing. Now, there were clashes, of course, artillery duels, but when talking about the previous 24 hours, we haven't got even a single geolocation of bombing of Antonov Bridge, the situation in Kazachie Lagery, or some drone strikes against the boats in the Dnipro River. The only thing we got is just the Ministry of Defense report regarding losses of the Ukrainians in 30 soldiers as a result of clashes on this territory. And probably that's it for today. Military Summer channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.